Again, all the political scientists and economists of different schools of thought always believed that the market requires rules, the so-called rules of the game, in order to function. But the agreement was that the rules of the game have to be fixed by democratic politics, not by the market himself. Of course, there were differences. If you were, let's say, conservative, you would suggest certain rules. If you are laborist, other rules. But the agreement was that the rules of the market game should stem or come out from a democratic process. A democratic process where different people, using dialectics of one type or other, confront, etc. Now, again, what happened in the last 30 years? No, they said. Important scholar, they wrote important books saying, no, that is an old story. The new story, the new truth is the following, that the market has to be efficient, we said before. Okay, democracy is not efficient. Because, by definition, it's not efficient. Because under democracy, to take a decision takes time. 1 month. In Italy, we take ages, centuries, but we are particular, because then we have other ways of taking decisions. But, you see, in any parliament, in any Congress, it takes time to take decisions. So, the conclusion was, the market has to be efficient. Democracy is not efficient, hence, ergo, in Latin, hence, the rules of the market game should be fixed by the merchants themselves. That is the so-called self-referential thesis. When you read that the market has become self-referential, that is the meaning. In other words, are the operators, or better to say, the economic agents themselves, who fix the rules of their game. Now, if you consider this fact, are you perhaps worried or surprised that the crisis these days occurred? Of course not. Of course not. Because who fixed the rules of Basel II? Those of you who are experts in banking, they know Basel. Who fixed those rules? Who fixed the rules of the so-called, at the international level, of the contract? Not parliament, not Congress, not politicians, but businessmen themselves. They meet in beautiful hotels like this one, in New York or in Geneva or in Basel. They make agreement among themselves, and then that are the new rules. Consider the rating, the companies doing rates like Moody's, etc. You know, what was the rule? Who paid for the services provided by the rating agency? The controlled people themselves. So if I am a company, I am a bank, and you are Moody, I say, Moody, come here and make a rating of my... You understand the implication. If I pay you well, you write that I get triple A. What happened? Lehman Brothers Bank, few days before she went to bankrupt, she got a very good rating. And so people today say, oh, the present crisis is the result of the fact that there were no control. But that is ridiculous. Because the rule was no control. That was the rule. Because it is obvious that economic agents, they did not want to be controlled. And that, in fact, they implemented that. So now you understand that the third separation played a major role in the explanation of the various paradoxes I was talking about. And the proposal of the encyclica is to put together. The market is essential. We cannot do without market economy. That everybody can understand. But the market is not a matter of being controlled. But the fact is that we need institutions which are capable of fixing the rules of the game. And in that way, because you see, the ultimate target of the market cannot be fixed by the merchants themselves, but the people, civil society, the people who, using democratic tools, decide what is best for them to be achieved in a particular historical condition, etc., etc. So now you start to understand why this encyclica is getting a consensus, or in any case attention. Because it is not simply an indication of what is going wrong. That was in general the case of the previous encyclica, of the social teaching of the Church, a denunciation. There is not only a denunciation, but there is also an explication of why what is going wrong in our societies today happened. In other words, there is an indication of the causes. Finally, let's say the third, not part, but the third element of this encyclica is an attempt to answer to the following question. If that is the case, what should we do? In other words, how to realize a triple marriage? Because it's a matter of realizing a triple marriage, the marriage between solidarity and efficiency, the marriage between labor and wealth, the marriage between market and democracy. Now, in the encyclica, it is obvious there are no technical indications. That is true, and that's important. It would have been a violation of principle of laity if the Pope had written, you should do that. So, in line with the tradition of the social teaching of the Church, in the encyclical we find not a recipe, so to speak, but we find guiding principles which will help us to obtain the triple marriage we are talking about. And this guiding principle can be resumed in the following three key words. One is the key word of fraternity. The second one is contributive justice. And the third one is common good. If you read the encyclica, you will notice that these three words are used many, many, many times. Let me again comment very briefly. Now, the principle of fraternity is the first time that it appears in a papal encyclica. The first time, In all the previous encyclica, the principle of fraternity never occurred. That is an absolute novelty. And in fact, the chapter 3 of the encyclica, the title of chapter 3 starts with fraternity, blah, 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 etc., etc. Now, what is the novelty? Of course, the word fraternity or the concept of fraternity existed even before, obviously. St. Francis was one of the major innovators, as we know, on this regard. But what is the encyclica means by the principle of fraternity is the following, that we should apply, the Pope says, the principle of fraternity to the economic sphere. Now, this is the reason why certain circles around the world, in particular in America, they said the Pope is blaspheme. But the Pope has sweared, so should be killed. Should be killed. Because the Pope has written something which is blaspheme. In which sense? Exactly for this reason. Because if you apply the principle of fraternity to the family, no problem. Everybody would agree. If you apply the principle of fraternity to a club, to a local church, to a local community, nobody would object. But to take the courage to write that the principle of fraternity should enter the economic sphere, should enter economic business, should enter the market, that is really something that nobody before this Pope had the courage to do it. Because that is, it needs a lot of courage. Because in the common, and in fact, that is why the first reaction, if you read the Wall Street Journal last year, the first, let's say, commentary to the encyclica were like a scandal. It's a scandal that the Pope there saying that we should apply the principle of fraternity to the economic doing. What does it mean? Business is business. When we do business, we should forget who is the other one. The other one is my enemy. If I can exploit or I can cheat, even better, because I maximize my gain. Because if you apply the principle of fraternity, you cannot cheat the other one. You cannot destroy the other one. So that is why this encyclica is creating problems to certain people. And there is no need for me to be more specific. Everybody understands. Because certain group of power all over the world, of course, they are afraid that this reasoning, this way of doing economics, might jeopardize their power. So it's a struggle of power. And that is the reason why, of course, what is happening in these days, pedophilia, etc., because as everybody knows, the problem of pedophilia existed even 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, are not new facts. Why they are coming out now? Because look at the timing when the encyclical was produced, look at the first initial commentaries, and then you establish the correlation. And that is really what, on the other hand, most other people are happy too about this encyclical. Because you see, let me repeat, where is the novelty of saying that among the members of a family, extended family, should prevail the principle of reciprocity or fraternity, which is more or less the same? But that is obvious. Always was like that. Even in the ancient times, the members of the family reciprocated among themselves. The novelty here is that we can have a market economy functioning well, because you see, we want market economy to function well within or under the principle of fraternity or reciprocity. That is why in the encyclical, for the first time, the Pope mentioned examples, actual examples, to indicate that this principle is not utopian, as people believe. And that is why he indicates cooperative firms, economy of communion, which is that experience that some of you know very well of the movement of the Focolarini. The enterprises of the economy of communion, they are enterprises. They operate in the market. They are not subsidized by the state. They pay all the taxes like everybody, but they apply the principle of fraternity in their business. And what happens is they are doing very well. They do not go bankrupt. The opposite is true. So the Pope says, look at the same to the cooperative. You know, in Italy we have a very strong cooperative movement. In this crisis, consider cooperative credit unions, credit cooperatives. They are doing very well. All the other banks, they suffered losses. They are making profits. Now, ask yourself, why is that so? Because, you see, it is typical of their way of doing business to apply into practice the principle of fraternity, etc. Of course, there are many other forms. Consider the social enterprises. Now, the Parliament, the European Parliament in Strasbourg, I'm sure that you have read it. If not, go and download this very nice reading. They approved a resolution saying that we need to have, to give room in our market economy to enterprises such as social enterprises, cooperative enterprises, civil enterprises, which pursued a goal different from